Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Giandomenico, and I picked the topic of media and language to do for my TED Talk. Today, I will be talking about how linguistic characteristics are used in the media, how language is used in the media, and how language representation is used in the media. I will also be talking about how many different parts of the media, such as mainstream media, social media, and digital literacy. So first, I read an article about the representation of linguistic characteristics. This article did a study on how different linguistic characteristics such as vocab, figurative language, grammar, and local coherence are used by journalists writing in the mass media. They specifically sampled random local newspaper issues from Campus, Japos, and Sarai newspapers. Journalists construct reality and news reporting through strategic vocabulary choices, grammatical structures, and coherent clause organization. These linguistic choices influence how readers interpret events, often shaping perception beyond the events themselves. This study shows that word choice, especially emotionally loaded vocabulary and metaphors, subtly influences how readers view events. Grammatical structures also play a key role as journalists highlight certain participants, often emphasizing victims more than perpetrators, and use different process types to frame how actions or events are understood. Also, journalists use coherent clause connections such as elaboration and contrast to guide readers through a narrative. Together, these techniques show how language constructs reality presented in mass media and news texts. Next, I read how language is used in the media. Language is powerful, especially the way it is used in the media. The way language is used in the media is how public narratives are formed, identities are represented, and how power is exercised. This is done through techniques such as selective language, framing, choice of words, tone, and structure. Language usage in the media has influence over how communities, events, individuals, stereotypes, genders, and politics are represented and how society views them. Here's an example of two different headlines about the same protest. So we have one, youth clash with police in violent uprising. And then headline number 2 is police crack down on peaceful youth protest. The first headline insinuates aggression from the youth towards the police, while the second headline insinuates aggression from the police towards the youth. If one were to only read the first headline out of the two, or if they only read the second headline out of the two, they would end up most likely having two different opinions about the same event. This causes that person to develop a similar bias to the news outlet that they read. Due to the rise of social media and digital media, we are seeing more news outlets and people being able to share their opinions and voices easier. Language has played a major role in movements that gained popularity on social media as well, through things such as slogans, hashtags, and personal testimonies shared. Unfortunately, social media has also allowed for things such as algorithm bias and digital harassment. Overall, since there are now so many ways to hear about events, communities, and people from different sources, it is important to learn media literacy. Media literacy is understanding how different mainstream news sources, articles, and social media platforms use language to report on current events and communities. Approaching all these sources critically is important as well. And then next we have language representation in the media. In recent years, there has been a rise in advertising companies trying to include minority groups in their advertisements. Some obstacles these companies have come across are differences in language preferences. A study was done and shows that many Hispanic Americans enjoy both Spanish and English language media advertisement options. But opinions on language preferences can be affected by many different factors, such as length of time spent in the United States. An example of this variation is in this factor. A Hispanic American who was born in the United States who learned Spanish at home and English at school would most likely have different language preferences of advertisements than a Hispanic American who immigrated to the United States as a child or an adult. There also could be a variance in opinions of a person who immigrated to the United States as a child versus someone who moved to the United States as an adult as well. The other factors are language ability and age. There have also been concerns of media sources potentially pushing stereotypes about minorities in their attempt to market towards them. Here's an example of a restaurant ad that uses Spanish and English to market towards a general population of people over 21. We see this in the sentence, "Bring all your amigos and join us on May 5th for your Fiesta Grande." But this ad is offensive because it also states, "We have no idea why we are celebrating, and that's okay." This ad is pushing the idea that the only point of Cinco de Mayo is to drink, when Cinco de Mayo is a small holiday from Mexico that has history. Since this ad is offensive, it counteracts their thought to include Spanish in the ad to market towards different audiences. A study was done of the news coverage in the Global South. Within India, they discovered language and linguistic hierarchies within their news media. News sources that reported in English and Hindi were seen as the dominant news sources, since they typically speak to the elite and rich, while regional language news sources' perspectives are only really cared about within their specific communities. This creates not only an unequal linguistic barrier, but also keeps from all voices and perspectives from being heard. So that was an example of media discourse and language outside of the United States. Overall, language is a powerful tool. The way in which language is used by different news sources and companies has influence over the way that many people think and feel. That is why it's important to read all sources critically and explore multiple different news sources as well. So now I'm going to ask you all one final question. How can we make society more aware of the linguistic and language barriers and hierarchy in the media? Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.